Hello, and welcome to Handcrafting Your Retirement with your host, Brett Ramsey, where we talk about what you want in retirement and how to make it happen. I'm Wendy McConnell. Well, hey there, Brett. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful, Wendy. How are you?
I'm good, but I have been jonesing for a great Brett Ramsey story.
Well, I'm going to give you two. One's just kind of funny. It's kind of sad funny, but I'm going to share it with everybody. So recently, one of our family members, and I know this is going to sound sad, passed away. And they were very old, and it was time. They'd been in nursing facility for 6 years, 96 years old. They'd outlived everyone else in the family. So we made the decision just to have a little graveside, service, going to be real quick. But what I didn't know and what I never thought of before was someone has to actually identify the body before it goes into the casket, before it goes into the
Oh,
ground. That's a
yes.
thing. So that was our family member, and they were designated to do that. And so I'd left them around lunchtime, and then I was going to meet them at the graveside funeral, at the graveside service. So there I am waiting for everybody else to arrive, and I'm the only one there. And then slowly the other family members start to filter in, yet no hearse, no casket. Turns out that 10 minutes before they were supposed to identify the body, there was still no casket to put the body in.
Uh-oh.
So we had to have a rent a casket and find a used casket, so to speak, in the basement of the mortuary in order to have this funeral. So no matter what your circumstances, you're not having a bad enough day to where you have to be in a rent a casket. That is not a good story to be in. So the reason why I tell you that though is unfortunately that how did we get to the assisted living? How did we get there is really a story that a lot of families have to live through. And that's the guest that we have today. Is the reason why I have Dave Holder here, and he's going to introduce himself in a little bit, is really the story we're living in right now. And so my mother-in-law is in her 80s, and she is declining in health. And we're having to start to understand what are the next steps. I've used the phrase before, when we are in that generation that have the medical power of attorney for a loved one, when do we have to start stepping in, and when do we have to start making decisions on their behalf? And we're not there all the way, but we're getting closer. And so we had to start educating ourselves, as my wife and I did, on really what's this process look like? How do we really help our aging family member figure out that transition point from living at home, and in her case, living alone, to living in assisted living, and what does it look like, and what's the whole continuum and the whole process? So I find that this is very daunting. It's a very big challenge for tons of reasons. One, we've got just the issue of communicating well with our family member that's needing this potential change in their life circumstances, and that's stressful. I mean, watching my wife and my mother-in-law kind of talk through it, and what I call is they get along. They actually are cordial with people, right? For some people, this is a fight. We're watching another circumstance where the person's mental situation is they can't even really remember well why some of these things are starting to happen. And it's becoming very contentious because they will forget what the conversation was and why these things are happening. So the reason why I've asked Dave to be on here today is to really, I was just really impressed with the experience that he had, but also what I call his level of care and understanding about how do we start to kind of match make this process out. So I'll let Dave kind of introduce himself and give us a little bit about his background. But really, those are our stories. It's like, we don't want to be in the rent a casket situation, but all of us might find ourselves there one day where things just don't exactly work out the way we thought they were going to on that final resting day. But what's that transition from kind of living independently through that last phase? And like I said, it took that other family member of mine 6 years to go from living alone to where they finally passed away. So that's a lot of time. And it's a big, challenging period of time for many families. So with that, I'd love for Dave to introduce himself and kind of his background.
Sure. Thank you so much, Brett. My name is Dave Holder. I'm the owner of Assisted Living Locators of North Indy, and I'm a senior living advisor. So I help families with this whole world, as Brett was talking about. I've had the company, it'll be 7 years in June. This was not my career path. I don't have a background in healthcare or senior living. My background was landscaping. So I had a horticultural degree. I thought that was going to be my world. And that's what I had done for about 15 years. So if you have any winter pruning questions or how much salt goes on a parking lot, I can answer that for you as well. But similar to what you've described, Brett, my father-in-law about 8 years ago was diagnosed with dementia. And as much as, we knew about the Alzheimer's Association and touch base with them, we really weren't prepared for what that decline could look like. And we weren't prepared for what do we do if my mother-in-law can't care for him anymore. And we didn't do anything until the Carmel Fire Department was called twice in 1 week. We quickly realized, okay, this is too much for mom. What do we do? Where do we go? What's a good community? Questions do we ask? How much does this cost? All of those layers were right in front of us. And as much as I wasn't directly involved with all of that, I helped my wife try to figure this out. And it was just so overwhelming. We made the best decision that we could, and it turned out to not be a very good one. About 3 months later, we realized we're not getting the care that he needs. We are not getting communicated. He seems to be declining. Why is this happening? And so we started that whole process all over again and moved him for a second time. It was shortly after that I was looking to maybe make a career change, and was talking to a gentleman about, he was a franchise broker and spent an inordinate amount of time coaching me, but mostly telling me how smart I was, that I could run my own business, that I'd really been doing it, all these years, but to really think about it. So long story long, we looked at a bunch of different communities or companies, and out of the blue, I'm so thankful for this. He said, Dave, I think you're a great relationship builder, and everything we keep talking about is how you want to help people. And I was like, yeah, but what does that mean? And he said, have you ever thought about helping them with senior living? And I was like, I don't even know what you're talking about. Once he described that, I just lit up and was like, I could be that guy for my family, and I have to do this. And so with no experience or anything, in June of 2018, I opened Assisted Living Locators of North Indy, and it's been incredible. And I've finally, I'm 55, but I finally figured out what I need to be doing in life, and it's pretty awesome.
One, where they say is necessity is the mother of invention. So sometimes when we are forced into a circumstance that really sparks it, and you guys had to live through it, but maybe with our listeners, you can just I'm sure you deal with all kinds of different people, but if you were kind of saying like, hey, what are the basics of like, when should I start maybe engaging in this process? If you were like to really like paint the picture of like the ideal when to get started and how to get started, what would that look or sound like for our listeners?
Yeah, it's never too early. And I really mean that, because the more time you give yourself, the more you can really digest and understand what you would want in a community, what your loved one would want, understanding the different levels of that. So it's never too soon. And really, I deal with everything that's considered like residential senior living. And what that means is it's either independent living, assisted living, or memory care that falls under the assisted living umbrella. And by residential, I mean, these are not nursing homes. These are not clinical environments. It's very much apartment living with services that you can age in place in. And we'll talk more about that. But, if you're looking for independent living, this is going to be unlicensed, no nursing care, but it's going to be like retirement living. So that will take a lot of things off your plate when it comes to, landscaping and snow removal and any maintenance of that. You'll have access to activities and transportation. Assisted living is going to be the same type of environment, but they're going to have nursing 24/7, and they're going to help with activities of daily living, bathing, dressing, toileting, medication management. Memory care is going to be for that cognitive impairment, Alzheimer's diagnosis, where they just need a little bit more structure, a little bit more hands-on type of care. Those are the differences. So depending on what you're looking for, if you're 70 and you're saying, I don't want to live in this house and deal with this, I want stuff off my plate, but I want the socialization, I want some structure, maybe I want a meal plan, something like that, then maybe independent living is the way to go. If the house is getting to be too much and you can't keep up on it, maybe medications are a little difficult to manage now, then yeah, assisted living, that's going to provide a little bit more. Memory care, that consistent confusion, it's not a safe environment anymore for that living situation, we can talk about that. So it's nothing that a recent diagnosis of dementia, hey, we better call Dave and get mom into a memory care community. No, we can have those conversations about what those differences are between assisted living and a memory care, what those costs are, maybe some alternative things we can do. I can refer out to maybe preserve some money and not have to spend everything. But the sooner the better. It just allows us a lot more levers to pull.
That's a lot of the spectrum, and one of the words that I heard in there that I think can sometimes confuse some of our listeners and our folks is you triggered on this thing. It is what I call kind of like the triggers, and you use this word called activities of daily living. And so maybe you can just kind of expand upon how there are, as you were talking about those different levels, there are very specific definitions for certain things that kind of move you from one level to the next. Can you kind of expand upon that and kind of help people understand maybe why you leave from what I call one continuum to the next of care?
Yeah, for sure. So activities of daily living, you'll hear that referred to as ADLs. Anything that's like a non-medical need. So if you need assistance bathing, dressing, maybe, assistance with toileting, that can be just getting to the bathroom, managing your medications, reminders, things like that. That's what assisted living is designed to provide that support with. One of the biggest things that everybody thinks, well, aside from assisted living is a nursing home, that's the big one. It's not. Is if I move to assisted living, I'm going to lose all of my independence. And I'm always there to say, no, it's really the opposite that's true. They're there to provide that support, take things off your plate so you can stay independent. So someone that, might not be steady on their feet and getting in and out of the shower is kind of a scary thing. They can support with just what's called standby assistance, meaning a CNA can just be in the room to make sure that you get in and out. Okay. So you're able to bathe yourself, you're able to dress yourself, but boy, unsteadiness might, prevent a fall, but they're there if you need anything. So it's that type of support all the way up to like 24/7 type care to where someone that doesn't have that medical need, again, we're not talking about a clinical environment, but if they're needing more and more help around those activities of daily living, an assisted living community can provide that care.
And so I assume a big part of your role is understanding the need of that person or that family, and then kind of matchmaking and evaluating the facilities to say, hey, this one's going to kind of meet the needs. So, you know, how do you start that? Like, how do you develop that understanding of what I call what's it really like to live there? What's it really like to be at that facility? So how do you go about doing that and helping families actually understand what life would really look like if you lived there?
Yeah, so my business is to go out and really become a partner of these communities, and do the heavy lifting. And they're the ones that pay me a referral fee. There's no cost to the family, but I'm really there to learn as much as I can, what their staffing is like, how their food is, what type of activities do they run, how many men versus women are there, as much as I can learn about each of those communities, that's my job, is to understand that. And then really when I meet with a family, as much as they're willing to share, that's what I want to do. So I'm a little bit like a realtor in that regard, in the sense that, yeah, it's about location and budget, but I really want to know, what help does mom need now? What do you foresee in the future? What's important to her? Maybe what she did as a career to maybe match make her with some, community might have more teachers in it than some other ones. What's going to be important to her, and then helping the family understand what that community has and why I chose that to be a good fit. So some of that's going to also be, the success I've had with other families there, the feedback that I get from the families and their loved ones, that it's going well and that they do say everything that they're going to say they're going to do. But that's really my role, is to, again, you don't need to look at 5, 6, 7 communities, but if we really have those great conversations, I can provide those options for you where I create that transparency with my notes. And then we'll go check it out and we'll tour and we'll talk and we'll have those questions that I will be there to be that advisor and advocate for the family.
Well, you mentioned your own experience where, 3 months into the process, you felt like, oh, we kind of messed missed the mark, let's say. I hate
Yeah.
using the word messed up. It didn't really hit what we needed. I would call that almost buyer's remorse at times, maybe, where we all have experienced it at some level. Not nearly as bad as one of my neighbors. She returned 8 couches. I don't know how one buys 8 different couches, but
Right.
and returns them. And I'm sure that the salesperson at that particular furniture store was not happy to see her darken the door yet again for another couch. But that aside, how do you avoid like not having to do this multiple times? Like, so is there kind of some of those big, don't do this? Like, is there kind of what's the big mistakes that you see?
So I think, honestly, so much of the time, I always try to explain this to families is that this transition, whatever it is going to start out like a real estate transaction. You know what I mean? You're going to be obsessed with the size of the apartment and does mom have a walk-in closet or does dad have a den? We're really going to focus on those things. And that is important. I don't mean to dismiss that whatsoever because we all want to be comfortable in our environment. But the reality is really understanding where the residents are, because you can't age in place. So that means after a period of time, it might be a very high functioning community that as those residents age, they might have a little higher acuity and that will feel a certain way. So understanding where those residents are at, understanding what questions to ask of how they staff and what is their procedures for if mom starts to need more care or now dad is starting to wander, when is he going to go to memory care? Understanding all of that. I think the mistake that we made with with my father-in-law was the community that we put him in, I think, was a lot lower functioning than where he was at mentally. And he did need to have a lot more support and care. But I think he was still functioning enough that when he got in there, he was like, why is this lady carrying around a fake cat? What's going on? The activities weren't really designed for him or any of his interests. They were a lot lower functioning. So I think he isolated himself a lot in his room. He didn't want to go out there. He didn't want to do those things. And I think where the community kind of failed him is they need to engage these residents, especially with memory care. They're not going to remember things. They're not going to anticipate things. So they're going to need that encouragement. They need those Jedi mind tricks to kind of say, why don't you come help me with this? As opposed to saying, would you like to come play bingo? They're going to go, no. And then, okay. Then they just shut the door and leave them there. Exploring those types of situations with the community and creating that transparency to say, hey, this is where mom's really at. Is this a good fit? How do you guys handle this? How do you get mom engaged? And really drilling down and making sure that we're comfortable with the answers that we're giving, and then also doing additional due diligence.
Right. And so as you're talking through this, me being a finance guy, I just immediately start to think through like, okay, well, not all facilities are created equal, right? And not everybody is going to pay the same price because they're not receiving the exact same care, but not just, kind of what's the price tag, but how do you start to think through those different options so that, you use the phrase age in place so that, you don't have to move multiple times or that you believe there. So how do you start to think through not just the money part of it, but how that fits into the level of care and I guess to a certain extent is what should we be able to ask for or expect in those conversations versus, not, what options should we be like, hey, no, you're not ever going to get that option, that kind of a thing.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'll answer that. I think the way that you're asking it, Brett. So you'll have, when it comes to specifically to assisted living and sometimes memory care is like that, you always have what's called a base rate. And then you have a level of care that's an additional cost. And base rates for the majority of the communities, that's going to include the 3 meals a day, weekly housekeeping that, will clean the apartment and do some laundry for the residents. They'll weekly strip the linens off the bed, wash the towels. 90% of your utilities are included in your base rent. Activities that take place in the community, and that can be anything from exercise class to happy hour to bingo, book club, anything that takes place in there. And then transportation. So most communities have a couple days a week designated to doctor's appointments, outings, shopping trips, lunch things, one-off bank things. They can do all of that for you in your base rate. What people really need to drill down is understanding what those care levels are and how the communities determine that. Generally speaking, back to those activities of daily living, as I mentioned, they can do as little as like a standby assist shower. That's not going to take that much time, and it's probably 3 days a week. A lot of them assign a point value to all of the things they can do for their residents. So all of those different things have a point value. So that might be, let's say, 2 points. But somebody that needs a little more assistance showering 3 days a week, that's 5 points. Somebody that needs showering, full help, undressed, showering, in the shower, rinsing off, getting dressed, that's going to be a higher point value. So a community that has 5 levels of care might be organized in such that it's 0 to 25 points for a level 1, and therefore, and then you have to add everything all together to get those costs. But really, I think to answer your question is really understanding how far they can go with those levels of care, and understanding, hey, mom might be able to age in place here, but at some point, because of their licensing, their levels are going to top out, and that might mean a move to a nursing home. Understanding that will help us narrow down, do we want to be on a campus that has the full continuum of care? Or are we good? We love this community right now, and if 5 years from now mom needs a nursing home, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. But understanding that is really what I like to bring to the table and make sure we're having those conversations.
Well, and learning how to dial it in, because you were mentioning, in this scenario, we're talking about only one parent,
Right.
mom. And I think that's what we hear a lot of, is, a place for mom, that concept. But, the reality is sometimes we're going in there and, dad needs the memory care unit, mom's still alive. And so, how do you handle that? Like, how do you deal with the differences between dealing with a couple scenario where the care level may be different between the two spouses versus just a single individual?
Yeah, I'm dealing with that right now, where the couple situations where, yeah, exactly like you just said, dad might need memory care, or maybe is on that bubble for assisted living or memory care. Mom's really independent. So providing some options that might be, hey, probably shouldn't go into independent right now, even though that's maybe a good balance, because that's still going to make mom the caregiver of dad, because they're not going to have nursing for him. But also being cognizant of, if we go to assisted living and mom doesn't need care, which she can totally be in assisted living and not have to have a level of care, but do we have the right fit if dad needs memory care? And is it the right fit for mom right now? We don't want to pick a community maybe that's all assisted living where the average age is 85 and they're pretty low functioning. And if mom doesn't need a lot of help, that's a tough spot to be in. So finding a balance of that, where we can, if we go assisted living, we've got an option for her that's kind of higher functioning. And then we can also look at, sometimes there's communities out there that have independent and assisted living together, and they share those places, and those tend to be a little bit more vibrant. And that might give mom some more friends that are a little more high functioning, and understanding all of that when we talk about those options of where we want to go, not only right now, but what the next steps might look like.
Right. And I just, triggered a thought. We actually have that scenario right now where mom needs more care. She's in a memory unit, but dad is very high functioning and still independent, but they're at the same location. And so even though they're not in the same room anymore, living in the same, unit, dad can still go over and see her all the
Yeah.
time. And but he doesn't have to be that primary caregiver. And it's really comforted the overall family scenario, because it's allowed them to spend more time together. And and his quality of life is excellent at that location now, and he's happy. You can, I hate to say it, is you can hear it in his voice. And one of the things I think, as we talk about planning and thinking through this, I feel that a lot of people dread this choice, but I have heard more and more, as I've talked to other folks that have gone through this process, that the person going in to the assisted living or the independent living facility seem almost like get an uptick when they go in, because so can you maybe just kind of talk to our listeners about your experience with that? Like that, although there's kind of like fear and trepidation about the whole process, I find that most people actually, once they kind of get settled in, they seem to be doing much better than they were before they went.
That's such a funny irony. I had I'm going to tell two quick stories. I had a lady that was wanting to move to independent living, and she loved everything about it. She was so excited about it. And she just said, I just don't think that I'm ready. I just don't think that I'm ready. And we had these conversations. And finally I said to her, I said, I know this is really difficult, and I'm not doing this to put pressure on you or anything, but I'm just trying to give you perspective. I would bet that 90% of those people in that community that you really like, that we're looking at, are happy. And I would bet that all of them would say, I'm glad I moved. I probably should have done it sooner. I don't think there's anyone in there that's like, oh, this is great, I love it, but God, I should have put this off 3 more years. What was I thinking? And so I just said, like, what are you waiting for? And she said, I don't even know, but you're right. I just keep saying why I'm not, I'll know when I'm ready. But she's like, I do need to do this now. And she did move forward. Another situation was one of the few times that the senior has contacted me, and she was so sweet. She's one of my favorite people. She was living in a 55 or older community, had her own home, but she was having some, not cognitive issues, but balance issues. And she was falling a lot. She needed some support. And she had just kind of resigned herself, like, Dave, I don't want to have to do this, but I just want to be in a place where my kids don't have to worry. And let's find a good place. But gosh, she's like, I don't want to do activities. So you don't need to show me that stuff. I don't really want to do this. If I can get 1 meal a day, but I know somebody's there if I need it, that's all I want. That's all I want. And I'm like, absolutely. So long story short, we found her a place. And I went and saw her about 6 weeks after she was there, and she was a different person. It was so, I get a little emotional talking about it, but she was like, her eyes were lit up. She just looked like brighter. And I was like, oh my gosh. She's like, Dave, I'm having the best time. I have done more in the last 6 weeks than I've done in 6 months. I'm going down to the art center. They're taking us to tour the art center in Broad Ripple. I've gone to restaurants. I'm doing these activities. I've never done it before. So this socialization aspect that she didn't want to even consider became the absolute joy of her community. And it's just such a lovely thing to see. And that's when I know I'm doing the right thing,
Yeah. And would you say that's probably kind of your biggest emotional hurdle and the biggest myth, is, I see it time and time again, exactly what you just stated, which is I would say it's a return of brightness that we didn't realize in some cases in our desire to stay independent, that independent so often meant isolated.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's the story that we're trying to, if I could pick one thing that, I try to stress with not just my aging clients, but like, well, I don't want to be a burden to my family, or I don't want to be this. So what happens is they just keep isolating themselves more and more. They stay home more. They're more kind of, I hate using the word shut in, but they're more locked in because they maybe don't have the mobility. They don't have the ability to do that. And what I'm finding is that when they get there, they're making new friends, they're doing new activities, that the energy that comes from the socialization really does, I think, adds years, not just to their lives. Like I said, if you would have talked to my family before, for the woman that we were just talking about, the casket story earlier, no one would have ever thought it would have been 6 years.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And she perked up, like the quality of her life, her health improved when she moved in. I mean, am I off? Is that rare, or is that more of what you see?
No, no, 100%. That's what I see. And I think that, again, it's about being proactive and kind of understanding that. And before, someone does, decline in their own home with that whatever, you know what I'm saying? I
Yeah,
don't know why I just blanked on isolation. Yes. And then their care needs become really high, and therefore it's more expensive, and they might have a shorter time in a community. And I think that is such a joy to get. But, to your point, whether it's your loved ones or it's your spouse, we're not really wired in the United States to be caregivers, right? We only have so much time here to do this. And so we need to be sons and daughters and spouses and not be caregivers. And I think that's what the communities offer, is that it's a chance to get back to that. The kids are not the social worker, and they're not, nurses to understand what the doctors are talking about. So find a partner in that community to take that off your plate, so you can talk to dad about the Cubs game, or you can go out to lunch and you're not juggling doctor's appointments and following up with the house and all of those things. I had a lady that I had met prior to COVID, that her mom was doing pretty well, but they really weren't happy in this community. They had some concerns. We went and looked at some, but she was like, mom really wants to make a go of it at this place. She's got some friends. Well, mom started to decline cognitive like we saw it. So they reached back out to me, and we were looking at strictly memory care communities. And I told the daughter, I said, if we find a good community, we're looking for a partner, and they're going to take over all of that worry for you and all of that stress and the feeling that you need to be in the community all the time to make sure things are getting done. The right one will do that for you, and you're going to get your mom back. And about a month after she was there, she said, Dave, mom, I took mom a big a box of photo albums, and we spent the afternoon just going through them and reminiscing. And she's like, even though my mom's declining, I didn't have to worry about anything else. I know she's getting her medication. I know she's taken care of, and you helped me get my mom back. It was just awesome.
And that's the point of our podcast, right? Is what we call is to tell real stories about real people that are doing real things, because everybody, has their own, retirement story, their own journey. Yeah. And we want to craft it uniquely for those folks. And so, not going to spend a ton of time on it, but this is why we work together with people like Dave in those facilities, is because then we have to handcraft, okay, what does that, there is a cost, right? And so how do we pay for it? And so I can't, stress enough in this episode is let's plan together so that we have the resources in the right places to do these things. Because so often the resources are there. And it breaks my heart when I see that isolation and I hear mom saying, hey, well, I don't want to do that because I don't have the money for it. And the child is begging mom or dad to do it because they want mom or dad back. They're not worried about mom receiving as an inheritance mom or dad's money, right? They want them to live well. And so this is why it takes a team, and you use that phrase. That's why we've got to find the experts that can handle it. And our role in this deal is to help you figure out, how do you pay for it, right? How do you have the resources to do it? So I know Wendy's going to give us kind of our call to action here as we wrap up, but is there any kind of last story that you think that you would want our listeners to hear, that maybe are nervous about this topic, or just something that you really want to make sure that they know before they enter into that season of their life?
I know it's daunting, and there's so many layers to this, and it is emotional. I even think I'll just very quickly, when my wife was touring with my mother-in-law, for my father-in-law, there was one point where we looked at each other and we were like, oh my God, now we're old. Like, I understand that, like if I have to deal with this, and that means I'm crossing a bridge too. Like, I'm getting old, and I know that's so difficult, but don't be afraid. There's people like me out there. There's resources we can connect you with. There's so much more than you realize that can take things off your plate and make this easier, that really just make the call. If you're not ready to move, but you need some home care, or you might need adult daycare, or I can refer you to Brett or an elder law attorney to help you get out in front of this, just make the call and just take that first step, because you do not want to do this after the Carmel Fire Department has been there twice and you're scrambling. The more proactive you are, the more choices you're going to have. Like I said, there's more levers to pull, and you can make a better decision. But crisis, we'll figure it out the same way, but it'll be a lot less stressful. Just make that call.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Dave, if people have some more questions, want to know more about what is available to them, how do they get in touch with you?
Yeah, feel free to reach out to me at 317-854-9030. That's my office line. My email is dholder@assistedlivinglocators.com. You can go to my website. There is a free assessment that you can do that'll kind of give you some feedback is, yeah, it probably needs assisted living or independent, and I can reach out to you from that. I'm never far from my phone, so email me or give me a call and be happy to talk things through. Don't worry if you don't have a ton of money or anything like that. I'm more than happy to talk to you and give you some direction and help in any way I can.
All right. So, Brett, your turn. How do people get in touch with you if they have questions for you?
I love it when they visit us on those World Wide Web places and come to artisanwealthstrategies.com and find us there. And I think that Dave just mentioned something that I think is crucial, is that we have to get to know you in order to help you, right? And so often it's that first step. People are nervous. They're worried about taking it, and take it, right? Because we care, we want to help you. And that's why we exist, is to be here to help you to navigate these tough decisions. So find us there. Easy, click on our calendar, get on there, just spend a few minutes talking about your situation and see if we can't find the right way to assist you and help you figure out how to have that confident retirement that everybody wants to live.
Well, thank you to both of you, and thank you for listening today. Please like, follow, and share this podcast with your friends. Until next time, I'm Wendy McConnell.
Thank you for listening to Handcrafting Your Retirement. Visit our website at www.artisanwealthstrategies.com or give us a call at 317-660-2855. And don't forget to click the follow button to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Artisan Wealth Strategies. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions you may have regarding your investment planning.
Securities and advisory services offered through LPL Financial, a registered investment advisor, member FINRA SIPC.